Gaten and Joe's character, their dynamic is something that people really like. And I was very conscious stepping into it and being Gaten's side Joe.
The town of Hawkins isn't exactly the safest place to live in, and some of that danger carried into the real-life production of Stranger Things. These are the scenes that were dangerous and difficult for the actors to film.
If you're little and you're scared of stuff, do not maybe watch the season. Watch it with an adult.
Number 1. Millie Bobby Brown had to do a lot of spinning for this season 3 scene. During the scene when she is in the void with Billy, her character falls backwards after escaping Billy's grip. It seems like a simple stunt, but the behind the scenes execution of this scene was dizzying. Millie was hooked into a rig that spun her around and around and around. After doing the same shot multiple times and spinning over and over again, the nauseating experience actually made Millie throw up afterwards. And how can anyone blame her? That looked more intense than any theme park ride. Number 2.
It'll get hot enough? 220 degrees. We just have to figure out how to get him in here.
While the sauna scene in season 3 was meant to show Billy burning up, the actual filming of the scene had everyone on set dealing with the heat. The director of the episode, Sean Levy, stated that there were 100 people present that day on a small set that was very tight, and that he got over 100 different angles of the scene. Things got so intense during filming that Millie Bobby Brown actually collapsed due to exhaustion during the scene, and that shot is in the show. Finn Wolfhard caught her and had no idea what to do. You can actually see him looking off screen for help in the final cut as he was genuinely concerned for her safety. Their commitment to the scene paid off, as the raw energy showed up on screen. Number 3. The finale of season 3 was an emotional roller coaster, and no scene was more powerful than when Eleven read Hopper's note to her. To ensure they got the best, most raw reaction possible, Millie made sure not to read the speech beforehand. She wanted to know absolutely nothing about it. She didn't even rehearse the scene. I just immediately wanted to put a camera on me and find the way I react. And the way I reacted was pure devastation and sadness. So the emotions were raw in that scene for sure. On top of this, they also had to film the farewell scene with everybody. She said they imagined it was the end of filming forever, and everyone started crying when the cameras started rolling. It sounds like it was a very somber day on set.
Hey. It's gonna be okay.
Number 4. The final showdown of season 3 ended in the Starcourt Mall, and at one point saw Billy pinning down Eleven as he was being controlled by the Mind Flayer. This was a difficult scene to film both physically and mentally. Millie Bobby Brown noted the scene as one of the most difficult, because the two actors needed to figure out how they were going to play the scene with the level of intensity they usually bring. Dacre Montgomery was conscientious when it came to not hurting Millie during the scene, but he also wanted to bring his usual level of intensity. If you want to know how dedicated these two actors are to their craft, they said they would run around the mall screaming until they cried.
And we both lost our voices, and we don't even speak in the scene, but we were just screaming at each other.
Sean Levy described the pair as two of our most powerful actors. Number 5. Dacre Montgomery and Millie Bobby Brown's intensity didn't stop at that one scene. They were bringing their intense energy to every single scene they filmed together. Even if there's no screaming in a certain scene, I'd scream between takes, and so would Millie. We'd scream at each other until we cried. Dacre described the experience of filming with Millie as a significant mental challenge, and said that they both gave 200% into every scene they did together. Montgomery was screaming so much throughout the course of filming that he lost his voice nearly every day. It sounds like the dynamic between Dacre and Millie was truly special. Number 6. Let's keep rolling with Dacre Montgomery's extreme intensity on set. During the sauna scene in season 3 when the kids trap Billy, Montgomery took his intensity to a whole new level, and may have gone a little too far. In the scene, his character Billy is supposed to taunt and yell at the kids through the door. That's what was shown in the final cut, but there was a much angrier take. Montgomery actually headbutted the glass window, and did so with such force that his head actually broke through the glass. The glass was thick and not designed to break, so it was a shocking moment to say the least, and the kids reacted with horror. It was a very dangerous moment.
And it was physically exhausting as well. I put everything that I had into it.
But luckily, Montgomery wasn't hurt. Still, he was hoping the take would make the final cut. Imagine my disappointment when that take wasn't used. Number 7. Another scene, another example of Dacre Montgomery's commitment to giving it 200% each and every take. During the shower scene in season 3, Montgomery was so physically and emotionally invested that he didn't even realize he had covered himself in scrapes and bruises. He learned later on in the day when he took off his makeup and prosthetics to discover the injuries. One particularly gross memory he recounted was peeling the skin off the top of his toes.
I said, are you hurt? What's going on? I heard screaming.
His commitment to his character is truly impressive. Number 8. Yet another emotionally taxing scene took place in season 2, when Eleven has a confrontation with Hopper.
We went through so many different emotions. We get angry at each other. We are like father and daughter.
It also sounded like the whole experience was therapeutic for the actors, as Brown stated that arguing wasn't limited to just on camera.
We got angry with each other and we would express our feelings on and off the set.
David Harbour also had a cathartic experience filming these emotionally demanding scenes.
It was a sort of unlocking in me as a human being of like a love that was human, but that was pure.
Number 9. Will's possession scene in season 2 wasn't the most fun experience for Noah Schnapp. He had to wear black contacts throughout the day of shooting, which burned his eyes. And he was nervous to have to perform the seizure part of the scene. It was really scary. You kind of just lock up, and I had to prepare for that. A lot. On top of this, it was actually pretty cold on set. The heaters you see didn't actually work to heat up the room. It was winter during shooting, and Noah's clothing was not optimal. And the cherry on top is that Noah joined the ranks of his co-stars as someone who lost their voice due to screaming during a scene. Number 10. When Eleven closes the gate during the season 2 finale, there is a lot of screaming and intensity. It was a difficult scene for Millie Bobby Brown to get through, as it required her to be lifted into the air on a crane, while yelling non-stop. In between takes, Millie would have to recompose herself because the scene made her nauseous. I'd have to take a breather, throw up a little, then come back inside, do it again. Luckily for her, the ever-lovely David Harbour was right there by her side to help out, even offering her bracelets that supposedly would help her nausea. Number 11. Entering the void isn't as easy as Eleven makes it look. Millie Bobby Brown was actually floating in a pool filled with salt for this scene in season 1. It actually seems pretty peaceful, but it was a different story on set. It was freezing cold the day they shot this, and Millie had no help staying warm in that pool. The crew tried heating the pool, but it was to no avail, as it was too shallow to retain any of the heat. Fortunately for them, Millie was a trooper, braving the cold to get the scene done. Number 12. When Eleven is in Chicago with Kali and her gang, Kali puts the image of Papa into her mind, and Eleven is confronted by him. This was another very emotionally draining scene for Millie. She got so into it that even after cut was called, the emotions of the scene were still running through her. After filming was done, she went into the bathroom and cried for about 45 minutes. Number 13. A first kiss for anyone is nerve-wracking, let alone having to do it in front of cameras and an audience. Sadie Sink and Caleb McLaughlin both had their first kiss during the school dance scene at the end of season 2. Sadie was actually told about the kissing scene the day before it was going to happen, as it was never in the script. The Duffer Brothers revealed they were initially joking when they told her, but decided to do the kiss for real when they saw how strongly Sadie reacted. To make things 1,000 times worse, there were a ton of people watching, just to guarantee maximum awkwardness.
First kiss was in front of 200.
I love it. Yeah.
And their parents, and the crew, and my mom.
Number 14. Sadie and Caleb weren't the only two that kissed that day. Right before they did their kissing scene, Finn Wolfhard and Millie Bobby Brown shared a kiss of their own. They had already kissed in season 1, but that didn't stop this moment from being very awkward. As we know, the set was full of people watching. On top of this, Wolfhard stated that the gym they were filming in was very hot. To make things even weirder, all the extras clapped after they kissed. Talk about uncomfortable. At least Wolfhard warned Millie before going for the kiss.
He was like, okay, I'm coming in.
Number 15. As we've learned, Millie Bobby Brown has done a lot of screaming during her time playing the character 11. However, season 3 was a particularly scream-filled season for Millie. She stated that she lost her voice 5 times over the 8 months she was filming. But just because filming was over didn't mean the screaming was too. Millie was brought back into the recording booth to record additional lines and dub over the ones she already did. This meant screaming all over again. I was screaming so much during the shoot.
Usually, but she doesn't like this voice.
Today we're checking out all the painful scenes the Stranger Things cast had to film. From vomiting to slingshots in the face, this young cast was put through the ringer.
It's been an experience of a lifetime.
Number 1. Millie Bobby Brown had a serious case of FOMO. Millie found season 4 to be the hardest one yet for filming because she had such a dark plot in contrast to her co-stars, and found she was separated from them a lot.
It's a harder script, it's a harder storyline.
While that is pretty normal for Stranger Things, she could see Flynn and some of the others having fun on set, getting to do the more lighthearted, comedic work, and she just didn't get to be a part of it. And when you grow up with your co-stars and they're your best friends, that's rough. Millie said, "You get to see 11 in the darkest state she's ever been. This has definitely been the hardest season I've ever filmed. There have been some of the scariest things that I've ever seen as a human." Number 2. Well, it wasn't its intended purpose, but it works. To shoot the scenes where Steve is beat up, Joe Keery was already feeling sick and had to have menthol blown into his eyes to achieve the desired redness.
Which is fun to look at and probably less fun to be in.
Listen, Vicks Vapo Rub contains menthol, and what is Vicks for? A stuffy nose. So we're pretty sure that's the excuse they went with when Joe accidentally put it in his eye. Hey, if it was intentional, maybe it helped clear his sinuses. Number 6. Let's just say there's a reason schools don't allow kids to have slingshots. Slingshots are not toys. They are weapons meant for taking out the creepy upside-down monsters, and that's it. Well, Caleb McLaughlin clearly didn't get the memo and hit himself in the face instead.
No! Ah!
Number 7. We imagine Millie was feeling that FOMO around this time, too. Millie Bobby Brown split open her kneecap before filming Stranger Things Season 3, so she couldn't do many stunts or even too much strenuous movement, which included riding a bike, and as we know, the cast happens to do that a lot. Number 11. Poor Demogorgons. Deep down, they're just a guy in a seriously uncomfortable situation. The Demogorgon prosthetic outfit was tough for Mark Seeger to navigate. He had to do some really difficult stunts in it, but what made it so problematic was his sight was super restricted too. It was so tough to pull off that eventually they decided to go with CGI instead.
It had to do things that a practical guy in a suit just can't do.
Number 14. We never really thought of filming like Groundhog Day before, but it really is in some regards. Joe Keery found the breakup scene he had to shoot with Natalia to be overwhelming, as he hadn't quite perfected the process of letting go of his character once the camera stopped rolling. To be broken up with again and again and again was incredibly tough for him.
Filming a world of magic can be seriously tough in our world. From almost drowning to facing their worst fears to some very nasty injuries, the Harry Potter actors endured a whole lot of struggle. So let's check out which scenes were some of the most difficult to film over the years.
Was the most horrifying thing either of us.
But before we dive in, you should probably subscribe to our new channel, The Things Animated, to get all the hidden secrets and unique theories behind your favorite animated movies and shows. Number 1. Well, torture is never really supposed to be fun, so
I couldn't stop crying.
Even when you're acting opposite someone as incredible as Helena Bonham Carter, being tortured in a scene is a real challenge. Watson shared that it was quite horrible to do. The actress reacted so intensely that she actually made the Bellatrix actress and director David Yates feel uncomfortable. Number 2. Word of advice: pass on any challenges that involve being underwater. Everyone knew filming this part of the Triwizard Tournament would be a challenge. Dan Radcliffe did some solid training time in the pool with professional divers to prepare for filming, but he was definitely no expert. Meaning at times, he forgot what hand signals meant what. Communication underwater has to be done physically, so when the dive team saw the actor giving the "help me" signal, they freaked out, worrying that Dan was drowning.
This confused me.
Luckily, the actor wasn't in danger, meaning to signal to everyone that he was actually A-okay. However, by the end of it all, Radcliffe had spent 41 hours under very cold water. He was lucky the worst he wound up with was just 2 ear infections.
The main thing that really sort of was a bit frustrating.
Number 3. The room of requirement couldn't be everything for everyone all the time. Unfortunately for Bonnie Wright, this room full of magic and power was really tough to work in because of how claustrophobic she was left feeling. With Dumbledore's army being so big, there was always a crowd, and being confined into such a small space left Wright really struggling. Her on-screen brothers weren't such big fans of the room either. The Phelps twins struggled with how much heat the fireplaces throughout the room emitted, making for some seriously sweaty actors in all those warm sweaters.
I've never told anyone this, but I hated the room requirement set.
Number 4. Her character definitely wouldn't have felt this way. Imelda Staunton really is a great actress. We'd never have believed that she actually felt awful when torturing Radcliffe. The always evil character was the furthest thing away from who Staunton was, and the actress admitted that filming those scenes was a real struggle for her, calling it horrible and unpleasant. Poor Staunton was left feeling guilty for days after the fact whenever she had to go full evil.
You know, the scene where she gives him the detention was uncomfortable for me.
Number 5. This was a doozy. Cedric losing his life is very sad, but it looks fairly simple technically. The truth is, though, Pattinson suffered during filming because of the stunt he had to do for it. The actor was set up with some wires wrapped around his groin area that would allow him to roll once hit with the unforgivable curse. Let's just say our Pats was very happy when the final cut was called. Number 6. Even his co-stars were shocked he took on a stunt this big. Radcliffe had proven he could take on some stunts himself and perform to the caliber needed safely, so by the time the Goblet of Fire came around, he wanted to amp it up, signing on to perform the big slide down the roof of Hogwarts for the cameras. Sure, he wasn't really on the roof of a castle, but the set that was created did leave him with a 40-foot jump on wires, and it still looks pretty terrifying.
I will never be allowed to do something like that again.
Number 7. When there are 7 Harrys, things get tricky. We'd think that the fact that Radcliffe was the only one actually acting out the scene when he played the rest of his crew disguised as himself would make things easier. But it was straight up tough and kind of endless. It took a whopping 95 takes to capture all the action properly, since Radcliffe had to act out the scene over and over again, playing each different part. It was time-consuming, but oh so worth it in the end. Number 8. Emma wasn't shy about how much she detested this experience. Yes, I can tell you the worst right now. It was on movie number 2, we get dropped by a dragon into the lake. And Rupert wasn't so crazy about it either, considering he thought his heart stopped beating from the cold. It was the middle of winter, and the water they were in wasn't heated, and they couldn't wear any extra layers since they had to change out of their wet clothes so quickly after. Out of the trio, Watson was the only one to have the help of thermal pants. Number 9. Ugh, this part always makes us cry. Sirius's untimely end remains one of the top worst losses in the whole franchise, in part because of Radcliffe's heart-wrenching performance. This was the scream so blood-curdling and guttural that the team couldn't even include it in the film. It had Helena Bonham Carter and Emma Watson in bits, so we can only imagine how brutal it was for Dan in the moment, especially since he'd lost such a close family member around the same time. Number 10. It sounds like a party, but Emma Watson wasn't a fan. Let's face it, kissing someone who's like a brother is tough. Doing it twice? Well, that's just not fair. To make it all worse, when Emma and Dan Radcliffe got together to smooch, the two of them really got stripped down, and neither one was expecting it. Watson shared that, "It was the weirdest thing ever, and they only told us about the silver body paint the day before." Watson has been nothing but honest about the experience, explaining that, "It was awkward enough as it was without the silver paint and the strapless bra, but whatever. It looks good for the story." As for kissing Rupert, the actress was fully clothed, but it was still tremendously tough to get through, especially because the two had such a hard time staying in character. Emma expressed her frustration, saying, "It was supposed to be that dramatic kiss, but Rupert and I continued to laugh. I was really worried that we'd never get that scene because we just couldn't take it seriously." Number 11. Animals are cute until you work with them. If any of the actors were fans of monkeys or bats before, they definitely weren't after filming with them. The monkeys couldn't keep calm and were harder to wrangle than the young kids, and some got a bit explicit on set. And Grint had a terrible time when filming with the bats, since one of them decided to do its business on him. Yeah, that ain't cute. Number 12. The spider is huge. Rupert Grint was Ron Weasley in almost every way, including the fact that they both suffered pretty serious arachnophobia. The Chamber of Secrets was unquestionably the actor's nightmare. Aragog was portrayed by a giant, creepy animatronic puppet that looked real enough to leave Grint shaking in his boots. He even called them the scariest scenes to film. Even when they weren't filming, the presence of Aragog on set just gave Rupert the creeps. Number 13. It definitely worked in this case. Professor Snape. Love him or hate him, Alan Rickman gave a stellar performance, and that was partially thanks to method acting. The actor kept in character whenever he was filming on set, so the first scene he filmed with the kids wound up being a real challenge for them. While Rickman definitely didn't mean to, he intimidated some of the young actors so much that they really struggled to focus. We'd be nervous too. Luckily, that quickly went away once they spent some time together off camera, and they saw that smile we all love. Number 14. Fans of the books, remember him? The character didn't make it into the movie, but Rick Mayall had actually been on set and gave a very memorable performance. So why have we never seen it? Well, the actor did such a wonderful job that he caused the young actors to giggle endlessly. And remember, this was for the very first movie, so these kids giggling too long could lead to serious delays in production. They tried filming with the actors back to the kids and with him across the room, but he was just too hilarious every time. Director Christopher Columbus wound up not liking the look in the end, so he just cut the character. Harsh. Number 15. It's fun, but complicated. The high-flying sport never existed before it was written into Harry Potter, so J.K. went on to create a full, detailed rulebook so the production team could make sense of what it was, how to play, and then film it in a way that would captivate audiences. After all, no one wants to be watching these kids flying around on broomsticks if we have no idea why Harry was so obsessed with finding that golden flying ball, aka the snitch. Their production designer Stuart Craig was the one who took on the daunting task of creating what the pitch would look like, and his design worked like a charm. In the later films, Quidditch became some of the most brutal scenes to film since those broomsticks were not comfortable at all, even with the modifications made to try and give the actors an actual seat to sit on. Oh, and we can't forget, Rupert Grint also got a quaffle to the face at one point. That's gotta hurt. Number 16. They loved it so much they filmed it twice. Okay, well, that wasn't the reason. The production team was forced to reshoot the entire epilogue scene because the first time around, everything was way too rushed and chaotic, especially for such an important moment. All the actors felt really bittersweet, seeing each other looking aged, and knowing this would be the final scene of the franchise. Well, we get teary-eyed just thinking about it. Number 17. Who left the food out? For a team that was usually thinking about everything, it's pretty surprising that no one would have realized what would happen to the real food they filmed with for days on days under super hot lights. The foul-smelling set made filming a total drag for everyone who was close enough to smell the stench, and by the time they got rid of it, that smell was seeping out of the Great Hall. The actors may have been chowing down on real food for the first day, but no one was taking any more bites once their plates were filled with rotten food. A nasty sight for them, a tasty one for us. Number 18. Dan says it best.
We were very much just like kids being kids on a set.
Filming the early movies, especially the very first one, was an absolute dream for the child actors, but for the adults involved, well, it could be a bit of a nightmare, since filming anything with a big group was extremely difficult with children who were distracted by the magic of it all and each other.
Big problem was throughout a take, our attention would wane and come and go.
But it was pretty sweet to see how much the little ones enjoyed it.
Or they were just so happy to be in a Harry Potter film that they couldn't contain their excitement.
The wizarding world can be a dangerous place. So which of the Harry Potter actors struggled through the most pain? Whether it was because of sets or other cast members, these actors were left bleeding, bruised, and battered, all in the name of art. So let's see just how much damage they endured.
Harry!
Hermione, ow!
Are you alright? You must be freezing.
Number 1. It just hurts so good. poor Dan Radcliffe struggled through the most painful first day on set that he could have imagined.
That first day, we were trying to get Dan's eyes to be green because that's what they are in the book.
Sporting green contact lenses that gave him a wildly painful allergic reaction. This was so brutal that he couldn't even bear to wear them another day.
We removed the contacts and he's never had green eyes since.
Which explains why we never really got those famous Lily Potter green eyes.
You have my mother's eyes, yeah. Absolutely and unequivocally no.
Number 2. This queen took him down. Rupert Grint didn't know what hit him.
I'll be a knight.
During the giant chess game, the moment Ron was struck by the queen wound up being way more painful than anyone intended. Grint got nicked in the face by a rogue rock and was left bleeding. The evidence of what happened even made the final cut.
Ron! Don't forget, we're still playing.
Number 3. Like son, like father. After seeing this deleted scene, we can without a doubt see why Draco is the way he is. For Tom, his on-screen father could be intimidating.
Working with Jason was not always a treat. Just immediately turned into the most unfriendly, horrible person.
And Tom even had the cuts to prove it. Jason Isaacs came into filming his first scene with all the Malfoy cruelty in check, smacking Tom's hand on set, not realizing just how much damage those fangs on the end of his stick could do. Tom was left bleeding and with tears in his eyes, but
It's alright, it's good for the scene.
Number 4. Snow can do some serious damage. The final cut of Prisoner of Azkaban even shows us how Felton was feeling about those snowballs, when he visibly flinched before even getting smacked.
Who was that?
A snowball fight can be fun for one day, but going at it over and over and over again? Well, that snow can hurt.
Bloody hell, Harry. That was not funny.
Number 5. Rule number 1. Don't mess with Hermione.
Such a good moment.
One of the all-time greatest moments in the HP series is no doubt when Hermione delivers a knuckle sandwich for the ages. And while they did it fairly safely on set, the prep to do so wasn't so smooth. A film earlier, Tom wanted to practice so they could get comfortable with it. But what he didn't realize is that Emma would have no problem at all delivering a vicious slap across his cheek.
Quite frankly, he's been asking for it.
Emma has admitted, looking back on it, that she had no idea what she was thinking. Never again did Tom offer himself to that kind of torture. The sting of that slap stayed with him.
That felt good.
Not good. Brilliant.
Number 7. It wasn't just the actors who suffered on this set. Director Mike Newell really liked to get into the action and wanted to make sure he could get the best performances out of his actors. When it came time for the Weasley twins to fight, Newell wanted to see even more fire instead of the prissy work he described he was seeing. But this director learned his lesson, saying,
Of course, I was a tubby 60-year-old gent at that stage, and I really shouldn't have done it.
And why is that? Well, because when he got into it, this director wound up breaking 2 of his ribs while demonstrating how to fight. He wasn't feeling like such a tough guy after that one.
You know when you shouldn't break a director's rib?
Number 9. Not the kind you're thinking, though. Matthew Lewis struggled through the early years, forced to look like nerdy Neville around all the kids growing up.
Why is it always me?
And then he endured some seriously painful torture after Helena Bonham Carter accidentally stabbed him in the ear with her wand. Now this left Lewis in agonizing pain, nursing a perforated eardrum. He could hide his pain well since no one actually knew until after the fact when he confessed that he was indeed suffering internal bleeding. Number 10. Good friends know when it's time to put a friend in their place. Hermione was ready to call Harry out if he ever crossed a line. And this one, well, he paid the price for.
I'm the chosen one.
Yeah, that's not what she was wanting to hear from Dan. That said, her brutal reaction left the actor with a sore face afterwards.
You're laughing because you hit me so hard, aren't you? Okay.
What can we say? Hermione is a firecracker you don't want to mess with. Number 11. This can't end well. And surprise, surprise, it didn't. As if Radcliffe hadn't faced enough hardships on these sets, filming's left him with a brutal cut on his lip. This wasn't just any snake he was facing off with. The snake Radcliffe was going tete-a-tete with was the stunt coordinator on the film, who was wielding a pole with a boxing glove stuck on the end of it. And in one take, they got a bit too feisty. Radcliffe shared that,
It went up and smacked me in the mouth, and my teeth went really hard into my gum, so I had a fat lip for about a day.
Number 12. You gotta do what you gotta do. And Hermione was ready to get to work, even if Harry was hesitant. But she needed that hair to make the polyjuice potion. Yikes though. Watson definitely did not mean to hurt Dan in the process, only to help him. But as we've seen, sometimes Hermione just knows what's best.
I am still very much in touch with everyone that I worked with.
Number 14. That's not quite the way you want to leave a set. But unfortunately for Dan, bruises took over his body. The final film of the franchise had stunts that Dan described as the greatest physical challenges. He'd faced off with vicious creatures, but it was scaling up chaotically piled furniture in the Room of Requirement while trying to find Ravenclaw's diadem that really threw him. The fact that he spent a full 7 hours doing it meant he was black and blue all over. By the end of the day, I was just bruised and battered. Number 15. It was the battle of a lifetime.
Come on, Tom. Let's finish this the way we started. Together.
And considering how it turned out, well, it was a win for Harry, but Dan paid the painful price. Ralph Fiennes didn't hold back, and Dan could feel it. He explained, "I wore padding, but he missed it a couple of times, so anyone who doesn't like me can come to the movie and see me getting beaten up." To be fair, did we really think Voldemort would go down without a fight?
But we did about 3 or 4 takes, and it was a really intense moment.
It will forever go down in history as probably the hardest sequence I've ever had to film.
Hollywood may seem like a dream for many, but a lot of the times, behind the glitz and glam are actors struggling to even get through a scene. What the cast and crew of TV series and movies have to go through in order to get their work to the big screen is absolutely unimaginable. From harsh filming conditions, strict diets that include dehydration, and life-changing stunts, you're about to be surprised at just how many of the hardest movie scenes were caught on camera.
What was the hardest scene to shoot with me?
All of your scenes are really...
Get out of here.
Tom Holland may have struggled with keeping details of his Marvel movies under wraps, but on set, he has an entire crew to help make sure the public doesn't even catch a glimpse of what they're filming. However, this can make filming extremely difficult for the actors. When Tom and Zendaya filmed their date scene and walked across the bridge, once the director called cut, they'd have to dash to hide in a tiny tent away from the public eye.
And then we had to come back out, and then it got really late, and there was like a football game or something.
Yeah. Doing this over and over again had Tom and Zendaya absolutely exhausted. Bridgerton isn't what you would call an action-packed show, but filming the dance scenes were brutal. The cast weren't professional dancers, which meant they endured 6 weeks of intense dance practice. But no amount of practice prepared them for how challenging it was to perform intricate steps and dialogue at the same time. Actress Phoebe Dynevor said it was quite difficult to pull off.
You are a Bridgerton. There is nothing you cannot do.
Celebrities may spend their downtime lounging in penthouses and luxury homes, but on the set of movies like The Hunger Games, they're splashing around sewers. Seriously.
It was a brutal 3 weeks.
For the filming of the sewer sequence in Mockingjay Part 2, they filmed in an actual sewer that was painfully hot. To add to how gross it must have been, after a few hours, Liam Hemsworth's very absorbent costume weighed over 20 pounds, restricting his ability to even act out the scene.
Very physically demanding, very emotionally demanding.
Getting to film in Hungary might seem like a dream, but the Shadow and Bone cast are admitting that while it was beautiful, a lot of the time it was rough. Most of the weather conditions you see going on in the show were 100% real, especially the sleet and thunderstorms. Now imagine having to spend hours on end enduring these conditions.
Pretty terrifying.
Actors Danielle Galligan and Callahan Skogman said the cherry on top was having to film in a cold water tank during these conditions. Cherry deals with much heavier content than Tom Holland is used to filming for Marvel, which made the whole process of filming the movie difficult. The war scenes in particular are very overwhelming and require so many pieces to fit together. Needless to say, Tom was challenged and said, "This role took me to some of the darkest places I have ever been. Emotionally, physically, anythingly. He even almost broke his nose while filming."
So I'm really proud of this movie.
The After series is steamy, but behind the scenes, we guess you can say the steaminess evaporates. We all know this iconic lake scene between Tessa and Hardin, right? Well, for actor Hero Finds Tiffin, that scene was suffocating. Literally, he wasn't able to touch the floor in the lake, which meant he was struggling to keep afloat and not drown while also trying to give his best performance.
You think that's weird?
No. If they sound a little out of breath during the scene, it's because they were. In the end, many toe cramps later, they managed to get it done. We've heard of actors having to go on strict diets to get in shape for a film, but for this role in The Witcher, Henry Cavill had to dehydrate himself. You heard us! The actor essentially gave up water for 4 days in order to film shirtless scenes, like this one in the bathtub.
It's a very iconic moment.
Supposedly, it helped him seem like he had more muscle definition. It got so bad by the 4th day that he said he could actually smell nearby water.
I was surprised that I still existed.
Just watching the Battle of the Bastards in Game of Thrones was tense, but for Kit Harington, it was one of the most challenging scenes he ever had to shoot in his role as Jon Snow. They had to rehearse the scene for weeks because the battle was one long continuous take, which means everything had to go perfectly. As you could imagine, it took hours and hours. We're exhausted just thinking about it.
It feels good to be alive.
Sometimes it isn't wild set locations or epic stunts that make things difficult to film. Sometimes it's just baking. We're sorry to burst your bubble, but to all the boys, Lara Jean is far from a good baker in real life. Lana Condor has explained how difficult those baking scenes were for her because she had no experience. In order to get through it, they had to hire a professional baker to stand next to her and instruct her on what to do and how to do it just so it could pass as convincing on screen.
It was a educational experience.
You'd assume that the hard scenes to film for Brie Larson and Captain Marvel would be some intense stunts, but that couldn't be further from the truth. Her most challenging scenes were the ones she had to film with her furry friend Goose.
Great scene partner, gave a lot.
Brie is highly allergic to cats, so you can just imagine how she must have been filming on those days. But Brie was able to find humor in the situation.
It was kind of like the ongoing joke that like I would do like crazy wirework stunts.
But then the cat showed up on set and I was like, we need to have a plan.
I'd be like stressed out, like washing my hands a million times.
Believe it or not, the actual heist scenes in Money Heist were a piece of cake to film for the actors in comparison to their season 3 adventure on a boat. They were filming in the middle of an ocean in Thailand in weather that was excruciatingly hot. The mix of high waves and blazing sun had the cast getting sick over the side of the boat. Actor Miguel Herrán even had a heat stroke by the end of it. We won't even touch on how awkward filming the 50 Shades of Grey films must have been, but we're going to discuss what Dakota Johnson is claiming as one of the toughest scenes to film: the elevator scene. The elevator was filled with the extras we see in the final cut. But behind the cameras were 50 crew members, all confined to the tiny space where Dakota and Jamie Dornan got quite intimate.
It is a kind of bizarre experience.
Andrew Lincoln's first scene of the entire Walking Dead series ended up being his most difficult to film. It's the moment where Rick is faced with having to take down a little zombie girl.
That's when I realized this is going to be the greatest job of my career, but also the most painful.
This emotionally bothered him so much that after a few takes, he was so distressed and physically needed to stop. Talk about nauseating. Just what did Leonardo DiCaprio have to go through in order to finally win an Oscar? Well, his time filming The Revenant wasn't pretty, and it's difficult to pick just one challenging thing he had to endure on camera. From having to eat raw liver, film with a real bear, and develop hypothermia, we're going to say Leo wins for having the most difficult time on set.
I've never quite seen anything cinematically like that.
Watching Saul being kidnapped and forced to dig his own grave was dark, but behind the scenes it was also grim, not only for Saul's actor, Bob Odenkirk, but for Jesse and Walt's actors, Bryan Cranston and Aaron Paul as well. It was absolutely freezing on location, and the winds were so strong the dirt around them was blowing straight into their faces. Check out what Walt had to say about the scene. I'm supposed to hold the gun out, and I'm so cold that I'm shaking, and I'm like, oh my god. That was probably the toughest scene to do.
He knew what he was talking about.
Charlize Theron and Zoe Kravitz had a lot to say about being on the set of Mad Max, including that filming the movie was one of the hardest things they've ever done. They were filming in conditions that included extreme heat, beating sun, dust storms, and days that went way beyond your average 8-hour workday. By the end of filming, the cast was exhausted from the difficult action choreography and dangerous car chases. We don't blame them.
It was really fun.
Please don't do this to me.
Euphoria is not an easy watch, and it's not an easy show to film either. One actor struggled to breathe on set while another got so overwhelmed they needed to leave the set completely. And so did a director. We're covering 10 of the toughest scenes to film, from the technical struggles to the emotional hardships that the Euphoria team dealt with.
I'm so scared, I'm really scared.
Number 1. The carnival shoot was tough for a whole lot of reasons.
Sam wanted it to feel like it was one shot.
Technically, Levinson admitted it was a nightmare. 6 days of dusty and freezing cold conditions made it rough for the actors too. Zendaya struggled to breathe while shooting, needing an inhaler to get through. But considering what they ended up with, paying the price was worth it. Zendaya said it best herself. It was a nightmare, but it was also the best. Number 2. That's what happens when you improvise a fight on set.
As Zendaya, it's not fun, you know?
The vicious battle between Rue and Leslie was tough for everyone in the room that day. Both actors fully committed, leaving no stone unturned.
It wasn't easy in the sense that, you know, your mind knows it's not real, but your body doesn't.
Zendaya wound up feeling so physically sick she thought she'd vomit.
You have to go to those points in order to get to the beautiful parts.
Even Sam Levinson had to take a beat to step away and recoup, witnessing the horrifyingly truthful performance. Number 3. Tough to watch? You can bet it was tough to film. The intimate and tense sequence is in part so successful because of Sydney Sweeney's moving performance, but the actress really paid the price, feeling actual terror while filming. Alexa Demi didn't hold back with her banging on the door, which really set the tone for the environment Sweeney found herself in.
No, just a minute.
Imagining the circumstances was almost too easy in this case. Number 4. Can you say intense?
That's when it gets kind of icky feeling, you know?
It took about 4 full days of filming to get just right, and jokes between takes became necessary to get through the tough content. When the actors had the chance to check out the footage though, it all made it worth it. What they created was wild and they knew it. Number 5. While Elordi plays him tough as nails, the reality is...
he's kind of just like this really frightened little boy in an enormous aggressive body.
Having to be so nasty and cruel to Alexa really bothered the actor. The co-stars have a wonderful relationship in reality, and while acting together was a treat, they did wish for the chance to film some nicer stuff. Number 6. Hunter Schafer's nerves were really boiling over for this one.
Who are you?
I'm Jules.
Prepping to perform totally overtook the actress and left her feeling extremely overwhelmed. Before even stepping on the set, Schafer felt the pressure knowing there would be so many people there to witness the whole thing. We're talking around 200 extras. With that many eyes on you, anyone would struggle to perform. Now this was an intense fight. Choreographing all the moves just right so neither actor got seriously injured was a key part of the process. Technically, it was tough to hit every single mark, and then there was the glass bottle to consider. The actors had to shoot the bottle smash 6 or 7 times to get just right, and while there were safety measures in place and camera tricks to use, Elordi and Cloud wanted to make sure the action looked believable, meaning they couldn't go just halfway. Jacob put on a brave face, but no doubt, the hit being repeated so often was rough. It was tough to film, but fortunately, neither performer wound up seriously injured. Number 8. Sometimes you've just gotta take a breather. Filming the intense moments became really tough for Storm Reed. The feelings were so overwhelming that Reed actually had to leave the set to get herself together and breathe easy for a bit. While there was rough content in the first season as well, the actress found it easier to shake off before, whereas this time around, some of those intense emotions from filming are still with her. Number 9. At one point during the second season, a whole new challenge presented itself. For Zendaya, filming certain tough scenes became much more difficult partway through because the actress didn't know what exactly was coming next for Rue.
It's all pretty painful, to be honest, because I care about her.
After going on such a journey with her character, it's no surprise Zendaya feels so deeply for her. Number 10. Filming a hit series is tough enough. Filming during a pandemic is a whole other feat. The production team regrouped and figured out a way, complicated as it was, to safely film a couple of specials between seasons.
It forced me to upend the entire structure of the series.
The self-contained chamber pieces with Zendaya and Hunter Schafer were an emotional ride for the actors and a logistical nightmare for the crew.
Rue does not have it figured out.
Luckily, the performers brought their best, as they usually do, and the crew took all the steps, complicated as it was, to make sure everyone in the Euphoria fam was safe.
Wow, this is what I've been missing.
Twilight was a cringe fest for a lot of the actors. From awkward love scenes to literal paper cuts in the eye and freezing cold filming conditions, it was no walk in the park. Unless that park was in Forks, Washington. We're looking at the scenes that were just downright painful to film.
I spent so much time just infuriated.
Number 1. Paper cuts. Our literal worst fear. Well, the Twilight snow was made of many things, and one of those things happened to be paper. Paper snow plus golden vampire contacts equals pain, apparently. And Elizabeth Reeser got tiny bits of paper snow stuck under her colored contacts. Her eyes were swollen shut the next day. Ugh, nightmare fuel.
Yeah, I mean, it was described to me as a horror story.
Number 2. A stake in the foot should have been enough to take Vampire Bella down. While filming some reshoots for the first hunt scene in Breaking Dawn Part 2, Kristen Stewart managed to puncture her foot. The reason for the reshoots? They all loved the hunting scenes, and she wanted to do a good job of it. Stewart admitted, we all wanted more of it. Number 3. One crooked thumbs up for this mistake. Kristen Stewart broke her thumb, filming her first scene as a vampire. She'd stated, I'd been on the sidelines for so long, just itching. So I was bursting to do it, which is probably why I broke my thumb. I was a little overzealous. Between a hole in the foot and a broken thumb, it's starting to sound like vampires are daintier than humans. Makes perfect sense. Have you seen all those sparkles?
We were able to really get close to to most experiences that she has.
Number 4. Pattinson has been very vocal about Twilight being a pain in the butt to film. Robert Pattinson had a much less noticeable injury, but it was definitely noticeable to him. The poor guy injured his booty. They were doing the fight scene at the end of the first movie, and he nearly tore his glute. They had to get a physiotherapist to come in and massage his butt cheek for the rest of the day. Hopefully, the physiotherapist wasn't Team Edward.
I think you'll be just fine.
Number 5. Jackson Rathbone experienced the true wrath of the rib bone. During the filming of Breaking Dawn, Rathbone did all of his stunts with a broken rib.
I didn't even tell the production company because I was afraid they were gonna, not let me do my own stunts, and I had to do it, so.
Number 6. Filming in the freezing cold rain is fine for a werewolf, but not so fine for an actor. For Taylor Lautner, the scene where Bella first sees Jacob after his transformation was the worst of all. He said, we're standing on that little hill right behind Jacob's house, and it was 35 degrees, and it was pouring rain on top of us. They filmed the scene all day. As soon as cut was called, he and Stewart would run over to a heater and get wrapped in blankets. They'd get 2 minutes, and then they'd have to do it all again. Lautner said, I just had to take myself to another world, so during the scene, I wasn't sitting there shivering.
It's challenging. I like challenges, so I like it.
Number 7. Honestly, gnawing a hole in somebody's stomach would be weird. Robert Pattinson laughed himself to tears over trying to tear the vampire baby out of Bella with his teeth. There was one shot where he had to look directly into the camera, and he was crying with laughter. He admitted, I was stopping tears from coming out of my eyes, and it looks like I'm crying in the thing, and I'm not supposed to be able to cry as a vampire. Number 8. Team Jacob gains a point after this one. The last day of shooting the tent scene, Kristen Stewart had the stomach flu and was vomiting between takes. Bet you couldn't picture that happening in a post-COVID world, huh? Stephanie Meyer admitted it was Taylor Lautner who was taking the most care of Kristen. She stated, and Taylor, like, he was over digging around grabbing a garbage can. I'm like, why is Taylor taking the garbage? Number 9. Taylor Lautner was sad over Twilight ending. The wedding scene was his last scene, and he'd said,
That won't go away at all. It'll be more difficult.
He was overwhelmed with emotion. After it was over, Taylor and Kristen just looked at each other, not really having much to say.
I'm looking forward to that next chapter in life.
Number 10. At least the team considered a rig. It's too bad it didn't work. Taylor Lautner had to carry Kristen Stewart for an entire day down a dirt path after the rig they'd designed to do it just didn't look natural on screen. Luckily, Taylor stepped in, but he definitely regretted it after a few takes.
It was uncomfortable for me. I mean, it's always uncomfortable.
Number 11. Crying, sweating, injuries, sounds like being human is way more comfortable. The vampire intimate scenes were agony for both Stewart and Pattinson. Pattinson was a sweaty vampire, which is technically impossible. And he was literally trying to stop sweat from hitting Kristen's back.
I have absolutely no idea how to do it.
Number 12. Rain, rain, go away. Anna Kendrick's not happy. Taylor Lautner wasn't the only one suffering in the rain. Kendrick joked that filming Twilight was like a hostage situation because of how awful the weather was.
I just remember being so cold and miserable.
She just recalls her Converse being completely soaked through. She enjoyed working with the cast, though. It was just that Oregon weather that had her struggling to stay enthusiastic.
So they are trying to get back to where they were. Hopefully, that's the plan.
It's time to dissect all of the most difficult Umbrella Academy scenes to film, including, but not limited to, cornfield explosions, amputations, and 7 hours of blood-curdling screams.
Definitely takes some discipline, takes some hard work.
Number 1. The stars of this show tend to put their vocal cords through the ringer when filming intense scenes. In this example, we're talking about Aidan Gallagher, who plays Five, having to chop his literal arm off.
Five's arm needs to get cut off, but he needs to survive it, so we had to figure out a way of him applying a tourniquet with one hand.
Aidan lost his voice multiple times when filming this scene, and then again in post-production while doing recording replacement dialogue.
I blew my voice out quite a couple of times shooting that and also in ADR.
Number 2. You'd be surprised to learn that one of the most difficult things to shoot in season 3 was running on a treadmill. Tom Hopper, who plays Luther, had a less than great time getting into character on those things.
We look like we're old men like we've just broken our legs and we're just getting back into rehab.
And to make matters worse...
And actually, when we had to do these tighter shots, we had to pretend to run.
Number 3. This was by far one of the cast's least favorite scenes to film. It makes sense why it would be shot at the very end.
That was a very painful day. We all had to stare up into these bright lights and scream for pretty much 7 hours straight.
Some of the actors who didn't have to do the scene expressed just how grateful they were to be left out.
I have to say, I felt very fortunate that I was dead.
Yeah. Some of them also expressed concern for their fellow co-stars.
I was
worried for a few of you a couple times. Because everyone would start to go blue in the face.
Number 4. Sometimes the outfit you've got to wear to work can make or break your entire day, especially if the entire thing is made out of leather and doesn't bend at the joints. The cast of Umbrella Academy had a super difficult time performing in these tight leather jumpsuits.
Oh, it was so tight.
No
You couldn't move.
spandex, just leather.
Not comfy.
Didn't bend in the knees or in the joints.
Number 5. Okay, obviously we loved watching this dance-off play out. But some of the less coordinated cast had quite a difficult time getting it down.
So who's the best dancer on the crew?
Definitely not this guy.
According to Elliot, the dance came a bit more naturally for Emmy Raver Lampman and David Castañeda, but for him and the rest of the crew, rehearsal days were much longer. Jake Epstein shares how they even studied Kevin Bacon's moves for a little assistance.
Like, get Kevin Bacon, get the screen. So we'd watch him and then try to imitate it.
Number 6. Who could forget this iconic season 2 moment? In the 3rd episode of the season, we get to see a great example of Vanya's powers as an entire cornfield is blown to bits. Fun fact, all of that corn was grown specifically for that scene. The thing that made it so difficult to shoot was just how unpredictable growing crops can be. In an interview with Slash Films, the director Steven Surgic talks about how stressed he was when visiting the cornfields 3 weeks before shooting, and the corn had just barely started growing. I was sick, he said. I didn't think it was going to be ready. But luckily, farming specialists stepped in and planted genetically manipulated seeds. 3 weeks later, the corn was much larger than they ever expected, and they had to relight the entire scene. Surgic told Comic Beats, "I was thinking the corn is going to get up to 3.5–4 feet. like very tall grass. No. We go there and it was 8 and 9 feet. It was insane. It was so high that it was dark inside when you walked through the rows. Number 7. Interestingly enough, Aidan Gallagher's most difficult scene was the first scene he ever shot for the pilot. No. Not because of a wardrobe malfunction or losing his voice a dozen times, but because he was so nervous.
When I jumped forward and got stuck in the future, do you know what I found? No. Nothing.
In an interview with Looper, Aidan discussed the scene where Five talks to Vanya about the end of the world. As an actor, the first day of any production is the most stressful. It's the test to figure out and see if the chemistry works between the characters, and you can feel out what direction everybody is going in. Well, in our personal opinion, we'd say the chemistry is very apparent. Great job, Aidan. Number 8. We've got a lot going on in this Season 2 episode. When Five arrives in the 1960s, he sees his siblings fighting Soviet soldiers right before a massive nuclear blast hits the streets. This scene was actually supposed to be shot in one take, but due to how dangerous it ended up being, they couldn't even film it on the street. There were a ton of logistical issues while attempting to bring this sequence to life. In an interview with Before and Afters, Everett Burrell, the visual effects supervisor, explains, "We couldn't control the street for 4 or 5 days or 2 weeks solid to build and prep. So instead, we built a 360-degree blue screen on our backlot in Toronto. We called it the Blue Screen Playground." He also shared, "The sequence was one of the hardest, most complicated things I've ever done." Number 9. The action-packed and highly entertaining fight scene between Hazel and Cha-Cha might look effortless, but it actually took months of training.
I think they'll be surprised to see us doing hand-to-hand combat and shooting guns.
Cameron Britton, who plays Hazel, shared in an interview with Inverse some fun facts about working with Mary J. Blige. With Mary, we trained for a couple of days before we went in and shot it, and she had been training at 6 in the morning almost every day for months. She came ready to fight. Cameron really took a liking to fight scenes, especially one in particular that he says was the most difficult one to date. Number 10. Diego is definitely a force to be reckoned with, even for a seasoned fighter like Hazel. In his interview with Inverse, Cameron gives us a bit of insight into what it was like to film that scene with David Castañeda. David is so fast that my reactions are just trying to keep up with him. He explained how he was essentially just there for David to unload a barrage of punches.
Hazel, why are you here?
Well,
Diego, stop!
Number 11. At the end of Season 2, there is a major face-off with the commission's agent on a farm, but something you may not know is that there was a major setback due to the weather conditions. In his interview with Before and Afters, Everett Burrell shares some insight on this snowy debacle. Half the scene was shot out on normal grass out in the field, and then it snowed, and it never stopped snowing. So for half the scene, we had to roto half the actors out and put in grass. And then the other half of the scene, we had to do the opposite. We had to put snow in for the reverse shots. Would you have ever guessed the snow wasn't part of the plan? Number 12. A fun fact we learned is that Elliot Page learned to play the violin specifically for the show. In an interview with Pop Buzz, Elliot shared that he can play a slightly decent Twinkle Twinkle Little Star, but that's about it. He even had to have a teacher on set, who he says was very patient with him. Apparently though, even with Elliot's Twinkle Twinkle Little Star knowledge, he still had to have a stand-in for the more complicated violin scenes. His stand-in was a 16-year-old prodigy named Imogen Sloss. The Umbrella Academy will never stop impressing us with complicated, intense, and beautiful sequences. It's clear how much heart and hard work goes into creating each season. What were you most surprised to find out about the show?